join us here shortly. Okay, so this afternoon we're going to talk about the DevTools and the DOM because we're going to use the DevTools to play with the DOM to manipulate it. Here are our objectives for this afternoon. So we want to be able to describe the document object model, or the DOM. We want to open and describe the components of the Chrome developer tools. So there's a lot to the DevTools. We're only going to play around with maybe like 3 components today. For the majority of the class, we're just going to only use maybe two to three tabs. So we're going to go over those today. How to use the developer tools to manipulate page elements to test them out, and start learning how to debug our code. So those are the hits we want to hit today. And then I have a fun Star Wars themed lab for you guys that we'll do for lab time. So to start, I will pose this question to you guys. Can someone describe the difference between HTML and the DOM in their own words? Maybe the difference, how they're associated, how they're related with each other. And you can put that, I see folks typing. You put them into Slack, or someone wants to come on mic, you're welcome to do that as well. So Matthew says, the DOM is changes made to a live page, while HTML is the code that is written beforehand. Yeah, that's a good description. See if we can add on to that. HTML is a language that tells the browser what to put in the DOM. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? So let me put another definition in here. You guys are pretty much hitting on it. So the document object model is the browser's interpretation of that HTML code, or that HTML document. Your browser creates objects out of the HTML elements, and those are called nodes. So I used the example earlier, like we could think about HTML as the blueprint, and the DOM, or the document object model, is the actual object or the building that would be created from that blueprint. I think I used recipe ingredients earlier today as well. So if you think about recipe ingredients as your HTML, or the structure of the object, then maybe the finished dish, or the finished recipe, the fully baked recipe, you could consider the DOM. That's a little bit of a clunky analogy, but I think you get the idea. So HTML is kind of the instructions, the scaffolding, and the DOM is the actual object that the browser creates. It's all located in the browser. So to demonstrate this, I want to give you guys, I showed you guys Wi-Fi this morning. Let me show you another fun little bookmarklet tool I really like to demonstrate the difference between the DOM and HTML and such. So this is called Kick-Ass App. So if you want to click on that, I'm going to share my screen and show you guys how this thing works. So this is similar to Wi-Fi. It's just a fancy little bookmarklet. And so if you want to attach this to your bookmarks bar, you can just drag this big button and just drag it up here. I'm going to put it up there for now. And what's a website that you guys want to blow up? You can put it into Slack. What's a website that you guys want to kick ass of? Any website you guys want to do? Google. Okay, Google's a good one. Let's do one, yeah, let's start with Google. And then we'll go to one with a lot more, like CNN.com or something with a lot of content. Okay, so here we have Google. So when we go to google.com, the Google servers sends us an HTML document, and the Chrome browser renders that into what we visually see here. So if I want to use this kick-ass little bookmarklet, I can kick on kick-ass, and you guys should see a little like janky spaceship over here, this little triangle. if you hit the space bar, it's going to shoot little bullets. And you can use your cursor, the left, right, up, down, to kind of maneuver. So up is going to be forward. It doesn't go backwards, but you can do, you know, the left or right rotation. So I'm going to blow up the Google icon. So I just blew that up. Blow up the search bar here. Actually, maybe the buttons were above the search bar or something. Let's see if we can get a little propulsion going there. See if I can. There we go. Got the microphone. Yeah, it is like asteroids, huh? Yeah, so that's kind of how this thing works. Would someone want to come on mic and describe what this bookmarklet is doing? Actually, before you answer that, what's going to happen if I refresh the page? Is Google permanently destroyed? Go ahead.
Normal.
Sorry, one more time. I was talking over.
Oh, it's all right. I was saying it would go back to normal.
Yeah, so when we refresh the page, again, we go to Google servers, we grab that HTML document, and Chrome re-renders that HTML code and builds another DOM. So what we were actually just destroying was the document object model of that HTML information. Let's look at one more example. We'll go to ESPN. Just something with a lot more content. So this time, we're going to be playing around with the DevTools, but kind of as a preview, let's go into, if you do Command Option I, that's one of the shortcuts you can use to get down here into the DevTools. And then let's click on this Elements tab. So this is where we're heading this afternoon, and I believe this was in your pre-work as well. So this Elements tab is, you can consider this the document object model. It looks like HTML, and you know, for all intents and purposes, it is HTML. It's a copy of that file that we received. However, this is the DOM. This consists of the objects that the browser created. And see how we can hover over different sections? And you should see them highlighted up here. Actually, what you can do is if you click on this, we're going to go over all this afternoon. There's a little icon right here on the left called the Inspect Element button or pointer. So if you click on that, and then as you hover over the rendered area, it'll point out down in the DevTools what object you're actually looking at. So just for funsies, I'm going to click on this Ronaldo picture. So I clicked on it, and you see how down here in the DevTools, I'll make this a little bit larger. Here in the Inspect Elements window, so now I found the actual object that I'm looking at up here. Now, one way that I can delete this, if you guys want to manipulate it, you can literally just hit the delete key and delete that image. And it disappears from the kind of the document object model rendered version down here. Now, if I refresh the page, that image is going to come back. But essentially, that's what this fun little bookmarklet is doing, is it's just deleting the objects in this DOM on this page. So what I wanted to do, let me do kick ass again. I should have my little, it may take a minute to load, but I should have my little spaceship show up here in a second. Try that again. Come on, Mr. Spaceship. Refresh one more time. Anyway, the idea is you can play with this kick-ass app, and as you destroy elements on the screen, you can watch them get removed from the Elements tab. It's the same thing as if we hit the delete key, but it's just a fun little demonstration. Let's see if this will work again. I may have some sort of ad blocker or something. I don't know if that's keeping it from running, but try it one more time. If not, we'll just move forward. You know what, that's taking too long. Let's go back to Google real quick. There's less information on here anyway, I guess. So I'm going to do Command Option I to get down to the Elements window. And let me do kick ass again. And so whether I hit the delete key or if I use my fancy little spaceship here, it's pretty much the same result. So let me scoot over here. And as I move the spaceship, you can even see down in the elements, see this highlighted area? So that's the little spaceship down here in the bottom. And you can see that the CSS properties are just going crazy because it's trying to judge the X and Y axis. In this case, it's judging the left and top. It's trying to get my coordinates on the page. But keep your eye. Oh, it also has a bomb. So if you really want to blow stuff up, you can hit F and it'll blow up a lot of stuff. Anyway, try this one more time. So let me find the Google icon, and you guys are going to be doing this in a little bit. You're going to be manipulating your Google page. So here it is right here. And so if I go to kick ass and I get my little spaceship, and if I go over here, make sure my aim's right, and if I get rid of it, see how it disappears from down the elements window. So again, just to demonstrate, when I refresh, the entire page is going to get reloaded. The HTML is going to get re-rendered by the browser into a new, fresh document object model. But that's kind of the difference between HTML and the DOM there. Any questions about ESPN is indestructible? Yeah, that's true, huh? Any questions about that, the difference between HTML and the DOM? Okay, so if you take a look at this screenshot from the lesson, so here's another way to envision the document object model. So a browser receives the HTML code and creates a model and stores it in memory, creating a document object model or a rendered object, a version of that code. And so this is just another way to look at it. If you think about a DOM tree with DOM nodes, you could draw this left to right if you wanted with branches, but just another way to look at it. So see here at the top, we have that HTML element. And then within the HTML, as we talked about this morning, you usually have a head section and a body section. And then you have different elements or objects underneath those sections. So the head may contain a title, meta tags, 2 meta tags. The body may consist of H1s, Ps, ULs. Then that UL would actually have a couple of LIs, child nodes, child objects inside that UL. So that's kind of how the browser thinks of that document object model. And a couple of bullet points right here. See Mike asks or comments, so the DOM is like my current loaded version of the HTML. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, again, the HTML is just a fancy recipe that your browser bakes into the visual document object model that you see. Yeah. And then again, when you refresh the page, it's going to do another call to the server, get a new version of the HTML, and re-render it. A couple of notes here, these bullet points. Some things to keep in mind. So the DOM has properties, methods, and events that each browser implements in the same way. So since each of these nodes is an object, as we saw last week, objects have properties and methods that we can call on them. And we're going to be using those properties and methods to manipulate the document object model. That's what we're going to be doing this afternoon. Each DOM element is an object and may be accessed and modified independently of other content. So we can get very, very specific and surgical. And this is where those CSS selectors come in handy. The pseudo selectors, being able to chain selectors together to get really specific on what we want to grab from the DOM. So this is another instance of where getting comfortable with CSS selectors is definitely to your advantage. The DOM is inspectable using the web inspector, so that's pretty much what we were doing just now with inspecting the elements of the page. It defines a hierarchy for all content elements in the document. In the console, if you guys want to do this, let me share my screen again. Go ahead and do a Command Option I to open up the Dev Tools. And actually, I think Command Option J will go ahead and put you into the console tab if you want to get really precise. I'm going to share my screen now. So down here, if you type in document, actually, if you just type in DOC, if you just start typing it, The really cool thing about the JavaScript console and the DevTools is that it wants to autocomplete. It gives you all of the options, based on the characters that you typed in. So if you just type in, like DOC and hit tab, it should autocomplete. So the document object is referring to what we see right here in the Elements tab. This is the document object model. And in JavaScript, it's also called the document. So whenever we manipulate the DOM, we're going to start that command with the document. So if you type in document and hit enter, you're going to get an object back. And if you open this up, it's pretty much everything that's rendered in this Elements tab, right? For all intents and purposes. It's showing all of the nodes that the browser rendered from that HTML code. So that's the document. And then since document's an object, we have different properties and methods we can call on it. So if you want to type in document again, let me make this a little larger in case you can't see it. So remember, we can use that dot operator. So if you do document dot, the really great thing about the console is that it gives you all of the methods and properties that you can call on an object. So here we can scroll through and see everything available to us from this document object. And you can scroll down and check all these out. Some of these may be of interest. I mean, we're not going to cover all of these. We're just going to cover, a couple. But if you scroll down, there's some that are kind of interesting. For example, there's a property called last modified, just for an example. So if you scroll down and click on last modified and hit enter. So for example, this is kind of a timestamp of when this page was last modified. It looks like I loaded this thing or last modified it, I don't know, a few seconds ago, because it's 2:52 Eastern right now. You could also do, again, this is just an example, but document also has a property called title. So if I do that, this is the title. This is kind of the GitHub, the title that you can see in the tab here. So that's also part of the document object model that GitHub inserts. So you can see that as well. We're going to be playing around with these other properties and methods this afternoon, but that dot operator is a really handy one. So if you don't want to go to the documentation, like I can't remember that method or that property, if you hit that dot operator and get that list, sometimes that's a really great reference. You can just scroll through and like, oh, that's what I was thinking of, that particular method. What are dev tools? Let me pop this into Slack. Dev tools are several things, a lot of things. So one of the most important traits as a developer is that you need an inner Sherlock Holmes. So you need to be a world-class detective, always having an eye for looking deeper under the surface. And that's what the dev tools allows us to do. Every great detective needs a great set of tools, and most modern browsers include some sort of dev tools. I know Safari, Firefox is really nice. Internet Explorer does too, I think, but I'm mostly familiar with the Chrome just because that's kind of what we use here and such, but they're pretty much apples to apples. There may be another shortcut in Safari to open the dev tools, but pretty much the same kind of stuff that we can do for our purposes. A couple of the useful things we can do: we can view the HTML, CSS as the browser has rendered them into the DOM. We're going to play with that here shortly. We can watch the requests and responses as they're made and received. So a quick example of that, if you want to go back to your dev tools. Oops, wrong window. So I'll go back in here. I'll do Command Option J, and then you can go to the Network tab, for example. And let me refresh the page. Give you guys a bit more real estate. Actually, this one's kind of a boring one. Let's go to ESPN.com. So if you go to ESPN.com and you go to the Network tab, let me make this a little larger so you can actually see it. There's like 223 pieces of information that ESPN is sending us, and you can see that here in real time. So let me refresh my page. So these are all the ingredients that we're getting from ESPN.com that Chrome bakes into ESPN.com that we can render, that we can see. So there's a lot of scripts in here, JS, a lot of scripts. We can sort it by type. And if we start at the top, So a couple of things aren't loading. This looks like some ad, maybe some sort of analytics tracking. There's a bunch of extra stuff in here. But if we scroll down, sorry, let me make that larger. Actually, this is there's like 115 pieces of data here, different documents, but this ESPN.com is pretty much like the basic HTML page. So you can click on that and kind of see the innards of it. A lot of meta properties, right? So they're tracking a lot of stuff. But what I was suggesting, and we'll play around with this starting in Unit 2, is you can see the the request and response headers. So when we go to ESPN.com, we're sending a lot of information to their server. And when we get the response back, we're getting a lot of information that we can't see. And you can see all that information here. And we'll learn how to configure the request and response headers for our usage. But you can see that here. That's kind of the point. And that's in your network tab. We'll get into that in a few weeks. What else can we do down here? Yeah, and we can also issue, well, we can debug our code, which is super, super important. We can do that primarily with console logging information. So you guys are going to get really good at using console log, putting that into your code, freezing code at a particular point in time and checking out what variables, what functions have run. It's a great way to debug your stuff. And then also issuing JavaScript commands in the console, in the JavaScript console. And you guys are going to do that today for lab time. So in any event, if you haven't played around much with the DevTools, I really want to emphasize, I can't overemphasize how important it is to get comfortable with them and how frequently you're going to use them. You're going to be living in the DevTools as a developer. Any questions about the DevTools? Again, there's a whole lot that it can do. Today we're only going to focus on maybe like 3 things that it does. And actually most of the course, we're just going to focus on maybe 3 main components of the DevTools for what we're going over. But let me put this little section. We kind of walked through this. Yeah, go ahead. Someone asking a question?
Yeah, I actually have some questions. So I kind of get, I'm not, personally, I just don't kind of get the utilities of having this tool. I can see how it would be useful, and I can see how it can be fun, I should say, actually. But I'm not exactly, I don't think I get the connection between why it's available and where I would be using it.
Yeah, give me about 3 minutes, and you're gonna, by the end of this lesson, if you still don't appreciate how powerful these are, then I probably haven't done my job correctly. But
the other question was, is this information savable, or is it just in that moment where you're testing it?
Yeah, so by default, whenever you refresh the page for what we were doing, it's going to re-render a fresh version of those files. It's going to rebake the page. But yeah, the DevTools have ways of like exporting the stuff that you changed. You can do that. We're not going to go over that today. Mainly, I use the DevTools as a sandbox. And that's what we're going to do next, actually. We're going to play around with some CSS. So I think you'll see the value instead of creating an Atom project and creating a CSS file. Let's say that you want to experiment with like the color font of your H1 tags. It's pretty painful and inefficient to go into your CSS file. I want to check out the color red and then save that, go back to the terminal or back to Chrome, refresh the page. I don't like that color red. I want it to be like slightly like red-orange. And then you go back to Atom, you type in red-orange, or you go try to find a hex code on Adobe. It's such a painful process. We're going to be able to do all of that testing and sandboxing right in the DevTools. It's going to save you a lot of time. And it's a lot of fun, too. So we're going to do that here shortly. I just put in a screenshot into Slack just to kind of sum up what we've gone over so far. So here's a couple of shortcuts in this screenshot. If you want to go to a specific tab very quickly. And then the 3 tabs that we're primarily going to focus on today are the Elements tab, which is where you examine the code. You can see the document object model and the nodes, and then also the CSS, which we're going to play around with. The Network tab that I just showed you. So the Network tab is where you can see all of the, like 200 different kinds of files that ESPN requires just to bake that thing. And then the console, which is where we can write valid JavaScript and such. So this is primarily what we're going to play with today. All right, so let's actually see some of the value in the dev tools. So I'll continue to share my screen and you guys can kind of follow my example. So for this, let's go to generalassembly.ly. And we're gonna hack our own company site, but let's keep it on the DL. And I'm gonna share my screen actually, reshare my screen so we can see both of these windows. I'm gonna pop this out right here. Cool. So here's our website. If anyone's interested, I think that the site kind of figures out where you are, and then it maybe shows you a photo. Does everyone else see this exact photo? I'm just curious. Does anyone else see a different photo, like here in the main section? Okay, I was just curious because this is our Atlanta campus actually. So I was just curious if this is like a location-specific thing, but it's kind of a nice picture. Maybe they just put it everywhere. In any event, cool. Let's go down into our dev tools. So you do like a Command Option I. Oops, let me go back. I clicked on something. Command Option I, and that'll get us into the dev tools. And then let's go over to the Elements tab. So let's say that I'm thinking about like editing this site. I'm recoding it, and I want to play around with the color of the body of this site. Now, this white background is part of this element. So by body, it's pretty much going to be this section right here. There's kind of like, there's different layers to this site, so just bear with me. But in any event, let's say that I want to play around with that. So what I would do is I can go down here to the body section. So highlight body, and then make sure that your browser's wide enough, and you should see a section over here on the right that lists all of the CSS rules for any given selector. This is a list of all the CSS rules for the body tag. Now, some of these are coming, if you scroll down, there's different style sheets. You can see that some of these rules are inherited from different places. Let's say that I'm using Bootstrap, the Bootstrap library. Then I'm probably grabbing rules not only from the Bootstrap default library, but I may have my own rules that I wrote in a separate style sheet. So this is essentially a list of every rule that is affecting the body. If it's marked out, so some of these should have a line through them, that means that that rule is getting overwritten by something else that has priority over it. So we talked about specificity earlier today, and so this would be an example of that. Somewhere I have a font family rule. This one looks like it's on the HTML. So since the body is actually under the HTML, it's a child of the HTML object, then somehow this is getting overwritten. We could find that in the stack, but that's not important. Here's what we want to do just to demonstrate the power of these tools. Go over here to background color. So if you scroll down, here's a body selector. The other cool thing you can do is you can check on and check off these things. We're not really seeing a lot of difference right now. But what I wanted to show you guys is, let's say that I wanted to experiment with the background color. What I can do is I can click on this background color, this little box, and it actually gives me a really handy kind of color picker, kind of like what we saw on the Adobe site. This will give you the hex code for a given color. It'll give you the RGBA, the red, green, blue, and then the A is the opacity. I think it'll also show us another version. Oh, hue, saturation, and lightness, HSLA. I don't use that one a whole lot, but here's the thing. So let's just click in here. And right here on the fly, see how it just changed in real time? It changed the background of my body. What would it look like if it was more pinkish? Oh, okay, that looks cool. Or maybe I want to go with like a yellow or a green. But it'll show you in real time. This is just a really fancy, cool sandbox. So imagine how painful this would be if it's like getting paint swatches or something and like trying to like figure out what paint you want to color your wall. This would be really painful if I had to go into Atom and find this color, put it into my code, save it, re-render the page. That would be super painful. But with the DevTools, for example, I can just examine this stuff on the fly, and it's really handy. So if I settled on this color, let's say that I really like this, I can just go to this hex code, copy that hex code and slap it in my code, and I'm done. But all of that experimentation was really easy for me using the dev tools. You can do that with font size, with font family. Let's say that I wanted to change the font family, maybe to Georgia. And again, there's a lot going on in here, so I'm not sure what font specifically that referred to. It's somewhere in there, but I think you get the idea. Wonder if I can make the font size larger. So maybe I want it to be like 200. It's changing it somewhere. Maybe something's getting overwritten. But here's what I want to do kind of as a little exercise for you guys. So now that you know how to check out the elements, the objects, and you can also see how you can change the CSS, I want you guys to take a few minutes and see if you can do this challenge that I put into Slack. So I'll get you started. The first thing that I want you guys to do is inspect the General Assembly logo in the top left corner up here. I want you to inspect it and find it here, kind of in the Inspect Elements tab. How would I do that? You could put it into Slack. If I wanted to find, pretend I'm trying to find a needle in a haystack. How would I use the dev tools to find this specific element down here? What would be my approach? Yes, you could click on the logo itself, but I need to do something before I click on the logo itself. What's the step I need to do right before that? Because right now I'm getting this little hand icon, which means it's going to link. It's actually going to go somewhere else. So I need to do something right before I click on it, as far as the dev tools are concerned. Yeah, perfect. So we're going to do both of those. Let's click on this Inspect Element button. Again, that's kind of the leftmost icon kind of in your toolbar here. So I can click on that, and then I can click on my logo. And if I hover over that logo, you can see just for a second, it should hover and show you the selector, which was like an A dot, the class name or something. It disappeared. Now let me try one more time. So if you look really quickly, as you scroll over the elements, it'll show you the selector. So if I wanted to use jQuery on this, or if I wanted to create some new selector, it's giving me the selector right here. I don't have to try to like play around and try to build it, you know, haphazardly. I can find the exact selector right here. So this is actually a.navi_banner_logo. So that's really helpful information, right? Yeah, so step one, let's click on the logo. And then we see that it was highlighted down here. So that's step one, so nice work. So once you've found that logo, I want you to go out on the interwebs and change that logo to some other image using the dev tools. It can be a picture, it can be like the Pepsi logo, I don't care what it is. But see if you can manipulate that logo and just replace it with some other image. And then once you do that, the image may not fit perfectly. So I can go into the CSS and find out, actually just hovering over it. I know that this logo is 223 and change by 23 px. I can see that right there when I hover over it. I can also see that here in my CSS. So right here, I know that the width of that element is 224, the height is 24 px. So whatever image you guys find online, it's probably not going to be in those exact dimensions, so you're going to have to like configure it. So once you replace that logo, play around with the CSS and see if you can like try to make it fit a little better. And then the final challenge for funsies, change the font family of the first H1 element on the page to Arial and change the font color to red, just to get a little bit more practice. So give me a thumbs up if you get those 3 exercises working. Just a little little playing around with the dev tools. Just one example of all the cool stuff this thing can do. All right. Was anyone able to change the logo to hack the GA site?
I was going to change it, then I clicked on the logo and it went back to normal. So, but
Okay.
you can only see like the top of it because the bottom was cut off by, I don't know what. I think
Yeah. So the little logo window is a certain size. So if you chose a different image, it's probably just larger than that little window for sure. But that's cool. Yeah. See if you can like make that window larger. Just play around with it and see if you can like make room for your image there. So we'll take another like 30 seconds and then I'll demo a way to do this and then we'll move forward so we can get you guys to lab time. And it may be a little clunky at first, the dev tools for sure, but you guys will be getting tons of practice with this and it becomes second nature after a minute. Okay. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna share my screen. You guys are gonna get more practice with this during lab time and such, but let me just walk through kind of the steps that I would approach to hack our site. So I'm gonna share my screen. So let me refresh this just to clear it up. Okay, I'm just gonna Google and like find a logo. I don't know, what's a good logo we should do? I don't know. Let's do Netflix.
Google.
Google. Yeah, you guys are gonna hack Google again here in a minute. So let me just find one of these. I'm gonna try to find one. Let me go back here. So when I look for images, I know that I need one that's, I mean, ideally, I would find one that's exactly 224 px wide by 24 high. I doubt I'm gonna find those exact specs. If I was really doing this for real, I would download an image, go into Adobe Photoshop or even Preview and just like resize it like it wouldn't be a big deal. But just let me see if I can find something that's relatively like in that range, like 200 px or something.
Search, go into tools, and you can type in the exact size you want.
Yeah, I would shrink the image itself though, just for like bandwidth considerations. But yeah, duly noted. You can also totally change the dimensions of the image itself. I'm gonna use let's just use this one. So I'm gonna click on that image, and then because you guys will do this a lot, if you want to grab this image, make sure that you click the View Image button. I don't want the page with the image on it, right? I want the actual image. And this is the actual like spot on the server where that image lives. So I'll copy that. And then the image has, I could probably, let me find it again. Let me highlight logo. So logo has a property of background image right here in the CSS. And this is the URL. If I open that up in a new tab, or if I just like drag that logo to my desktop, I could drag that logo. But let me go in here, I can double click, and this is kind of surgical. If you double click on the value of that property, it'll let you edit it. So let me go in here and get rid of all this stuff inside the URL. It's a lot of garbage. And in quotes, I'm gonna paste in the link to that Netflix logo. And so now it's actually here, but the dimensions are still a little off because it's actually the height and width are still the height and width of the logo, what was there. So in order for this to render, let me change the height to like 200 just for funsies. So once I do that, I can see that the Netflix logo renders. So if I was trying to like really add this Netflix logo, it would be relatively painless for me to come over here in the DevTools and kind of configure it and get the dimensions the way that I wanted it. Tomorrow, Colin is going to talk about another great tool here called the box model. And that should have been from your pre-work as well. And this is an example of the box model. So you can really find out the padding, the border, the margin that you'd want to put around an element. So that's super, super helpful. The next thing I wanted to do, what was the next thing on our list? Oh, change the values of the logo margin to make the image fit. So that's kind of what I did here. I didn't change the margin, but I did change the width. So kind of the same principle. And then note if I unclick that property, that you can affect the DOM and you can test it out, right? So it's pretty cool that way. The last thing I wanted to do was change the font family of the first H1 on the page to Arial and the font color to red. So the way that I can do that is I can come here and let's find the first H1. And if I just hover, if I put on my Sherlock Holmes hat, I can click on this H1 tab. Just yelling at my dog, nothing to see here. So here's this H1. And when I click on the Inspect Element icon and click on that, it selects it down here in the Inspect Elements tab. And then let's see if I can find like a font family. So if I scroll down starting from the top, here's a font family. And if I uncheck that, it looks like it goes to maybe the default for this body page. I don't even know what font that is. Is that like, I don't know what that is, but it's pretty nasty. But if I wanted to change it, if I wanted to experiment, if I wanted to put Arial in here, see how I can test that out, and then it changes the H1 font to Arial, which is pretty cool. And then if I also wanted to change the color, just testing stuff out, I could go in there and click the color property and just play around and see what I liked, see if any of these like look better. That does not look better, but in any event. Let me ask you guys this question. So for font family, the other thing that you can do, I've already moved forward, but you can click Command Z, you can undo what you just did here in the DevTools, just FYI, but I've already done stuff since the font family. But let's say that I lost it. What does this mean if for my font family property, if I list several fonts with a comma? What am I doing there? What is that going to do for me?
Like first choice, second choice, third choice.
Yeah, so there's several web safe fonts. I forget how many there are. You can go to the I think the MDN website has them listed, but there's maybe like 50, 60 fonts that are pretty safe across browser. You can be confident that they'll render appropriately. But if I'm using some crazy Google font or some other font that maybe I created, if there's something wrong with the way that font is downloaded or rendered, I still want to have some control over what my page looks like. And so the way that I can do that is I can list several backup fonts. So in this case, if the Arial doesn't render, it'll try to render it as Georgia. If that doesn't render, it'll try to render as Times New Roman. So that's how that works. I apologize. I think someone like UPS knocked at the door, and so he went a little crazy. I'm very sorry. Any questions about that? About we're going to get more practice with this, but about going into the DevTools, finding a specific element to manipulate, and then playing around with the CSS properties over here. Any questions about that? Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, so we did all this manually in the DevTools, which is pretty cool. But what we're going to see next after the short break is what if we could write a script or use JavaScript to do all this manipulation for us? Because if we're trying to do, let's say, manage click events, like if you click a button, maybe you want the font to change color or change font family, we'd want to write a script for that using JavaScript. And so that's what we're going to be doing this afternoon, is how we can use JavaScript to do this cool stuff for us instead of doing it manually. But the last thing I want to show you guys before we move into that, the network tab I've already showed y'all, so that's I'm sorry, guys. Let's take like a 2-minute break. I'm really sorry. I don't want to be rude here. Just give me 2 minutes. Let me pin the dog. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were coming home. Sorry. Don't beat the dogs while I'm on break. Yeah, my apologies, guys. The last thing that I wanted to show you is the JavaScript console in the DevTools. So this is another way that we can test out our JavaScript code. We've tested out CSS. We've tested out like playing with the elements, the HTML and the CSS. Let's take a look at playing around with the JavaScript. So if you go to the console tab, this is a valid JavaScript environment right here. And you guys should be savvy at this from the pre-work, I'd imagine. But this is pretty much like going into the node REPL in our terminal. We can play around with JavaScript. So just as an example, if you want to do like 1 + 1 returns 2, you can define variables here, which we'll be doing when we get into DOM manipulation in a minute. Var A = 1, and then you can call A, and there it is right there. You can also do, for loops if you wanted. So I could do for var instantiate at 0, and then let's just say while I is less than 10, and then I++, and we'll console log I for each iteration. And if we run that, did I put an extra? And I put an extra thing in there. Also, Command K clears out the console, just FYI. So I had an extra parentheses there. And so now if I run that for loop, counts out 0 through 9. So I think you get the idea. This is a super great environment. This is what we're going to be using for lab time to build those JavaScript statements to manipulate our DOM. Yeah, so that's the JavaScript console. We took a look at the network tab. We're going to get more into this as we go through the subsequent units. And then the elements tab, which is the DOM. This is how we can see how the browser interprets that HTML code. Let me get you guys into a little bit of an exercise. We'll take maybe 10 minutes on this, and then we'll move forward with more DOM manipulation. I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment, and I will paste the instructions into Slack. So let me grab those real quick. So you guys are actually going to hack google.com for a little bit of practice. So let me grab the instructions here. And here's the README. I'll paste this into Slack if you want to check it out directly. And here, I'll share my screen one more time and get you guys started. And we'll just do this individually. We'll take maybe 10 minutes to work on this. So GA DOM mod. So let's play around with DOM manipulation a little bit more. So if you go to google.com, have a very simple page here, like we were playing around with earlier. What I want you to do is, using DOM manipulation, the tools that we just walked through, see if you can turn google.com into something that looks like this. So you'll want to get rid of kind of the nav bar area, that little area up there. You want to change the Google logo. Even, you see how there's like a little microphone icon in the search box? You're going to want to change that to like a GA logo. And then you want to change the content of the buttons. So instead of Google search and I'm feeling lucky, see if you can change it to say GA search and I'm feeling hacky. So again, just to get a little bit more practice with this stuff. But let me get you started. And there's some starter code here in the, here if you scroll down. So let's walk through the first challenge. And I want to also show you guys a cool little part of the dev tools called snippets. So instead of creating a separate script file to save all this stuff, let's see how we can run a script from the dev tools directly in here. So let me go to google.com. And there's not a whole lot going on this page, you know, DOM-wise. So hopefully this will be not too crazy to maneuver around. But if you look at the lesson, the first thing you want to do is open up your dev tools, select the sources tab, and then select the snippets tab. So if you open up your dev tools, doing a command option I or J, and then go to your sources tab, and then right here below, there's sources, contents, scripts, and snippets. So go ahead and click on the snippets tab. So snippets are a cool way, again, in the browser memory, I'll start from scratch here, to test out, you know, JavaScript code and such kind of on the fly. So go to the snippets tab, and we'll be in good shape. And we'll do the first kind of command for you guys. When you're in here, the way to create a new JavaScript snippet to test out is you can right-click over here inside this window. So to right-click on a Mac, that's when you hold down the Command key and you click, excuse me, the Control key and you click. And you should see a couple of drop-downs here, and I want you guys to click on the New. So we're going to create a new snippet. So you can hit that, and then you can name the snippet if you want. I'll name this like GA-DOM lab. You don't have to name it if you don't want to. And now what we can do is we can put JavaScript over here on the right-hand side, and it'll run just like we created a separate, you know, JavaScript script file. So to test this out, you could do like alert, hello world. And the way to run this, well, first you need to save it. And you'll see that little star go away when you save it. Go ahead and right click over here one more time. Let me just make sure that I save it. And then if you go and hover over the name of the file and click run, it'll run that script as if it's like a separate, you know, a separate file altogether. And so here we run our awesome JavaScript code of hello world. So those are the steps to create snippets in DevTools. It's a cool little feature. We usually don't show that, but I just thought that may be of interest to you guys. We saw how to test out CSS and such, and this is how you can test out JavaScript.
How did you run it again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so once you, be sure, like once you add some code, make sure that you Command S to save it, just like you would in Atom or whatever. And then once it's saved, go back over here to the name of the snippet, the title, hold down Control and click on the file, and you should see some options here: run, rename, remove, new, and save as. And then if you hit run, it'll run that snippet. And so it just gives us an alert of hello world. Super annoying. Alerts are always good times. So cool. So that's how we do an alert. Here's some code to get the first thing working. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. You know what? Let's save this for the next section because we haven't really talked about the methods and properties on document yet. So let's just hold off a few minutes, and we'll do that lab after we talk about the DOM commands. So let's just put a pin in that for like 10 minutes because I think this will be a little clearer once we talk about some DOM commands. But go ahead and keep this open because we're going to hop right back in here in about 15 minutes and finish this up. So yeah, let's take a 10-minute break. We're going to come back and talk about DOM commands. I'm going to put you guys into breakouts and have you research some properties and methods. And then we're going to work on this. And then we're going to give you a Jedi Star Wars lab to work on this afternoon with a buddy and get some more practice with DOM manipulation. So take a 10-minute. Let's come back at 3:42. And we'll finish up our DOM stuff.